right, we are back. We've had a hiatus, Bob. I think this is like a week and a half without a posting, so I'm happy to be back in the game.
It's about time. We're in February now, believe it or not. So we are ready to go with another podcast.
Very exciting. And actually, today we are joined by Vito Trifiletti, who we'll give Vito a moment to jump into his career, but it's a storied career as a CIO within the food services industry. And I think what we're trying to do in the next few podcasts is take our cloud conversation and pivot it against industry and segment. And I think we've done a good job talking about the cloud as this is a platform, all the many different permutations of it. But I think, in the end, a lot of this boils down to how our industries leveraging it for, their better. And I knew nobody better to talk about the food services industry than Vito. So, Vito, welcome. I'm really happy to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. It's good to be online and talking to real people. It's been a pretty isolated lifestyle the last year or so.
It has. Actually, Bob, you've got a pretty interesting story. I mean, I want to spend like a minute talking about how isolated life can get in our world through unintended consequences.
That's right. What do they say in football? You're playing hurt. My technology's hurt today.
Yeah.
I had some work done in the yard, and I found my internet/cable line was next to a sprinkler head that was getting changed or moved out, and it accidentally sliced it. So I've been out of cable and internet for about 24 hours. Knock on wood, I might be back in an hour or two when they come back to repair it. But I just kept thinking, if this was next Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday, that would have been a huge problem.
Yeah.
I'm happy that it happened when it happened. But it's amazing, how isolated and quiet you feel when you don't have any internet or cable. And down here, we get that sometimes because of hurricanes. But this one was, happened by accident. So, we're fighting through it.
Very apropos for our podcast too, because in a way you've been cut off from the cloud. Yes. So, Vito, it's been our tradition. Oh, yeah, you have. Yes. The tradition here has been, usually to start off our conversations by giving our guests an opportunity to kind of walk through their career. And it's always been fascinating what we've learned along the way. And, up until now, it's been kind of, how did you get into the tech industry? But I think, with you, it could kind of meander a couple places. It's how did you get into, tech? How'd you get into food services? What brings you to this moment here?
Well, I've worked for 25 years in food IT, and those are my two of my most favorite things: technology and food. I grew up. My mom was a great cook. She still is. Some great Italian food. Food brings about an emotional connection and a very visceral connection around memories and moments. So food has always been just a really interesting place to work. And technology, it's just 25 years, you see a lot of change. And it just, the change pace has accelerated, in particular over the last 10 to 15 years. And so food and technology have always been fun. I grew up at Kraft Foods and had some opportunities to do some neat things in a very large global organization. Then became CIO of Preferred Meals. And that was a small food service company focused on K-12 schools, feeding kids in the school cafeterias, generally in large urban centers in the U.S. and a lot of underprivileged kids. So I found that to be a calling of sorts on a number of levels of helping people that are disadvantaged and bringing great meals to them where they needed it, and using technology to do that. And Then Preferred Meals was acquired by a company called Elior North America, which was entering the U.S. market. It's a Paris, France-based company. And I was invited to be the CIO of Elior North America a little over 3 years ago, and moved from Chicago to Charlotte, North Carolina, which is where I am today.
Yeah, in February, that's a really good thing. So
it certainly is, especially watching all the snowfall. I know what it's like digging out the driveway and trying to navigate those roads in Chicago. But yeah, Elior North America, it's a great organization. It's they do more than just K-12 school food. You know, they work in hospitals and prisons and high-end dining and events. Even catered the Super Bowl in Miami last year, and should be doing the Super Bowl in Tampa as well. It'll be limited, but you know, there's still food service opportunities.
Yeah, and we have a connection there because we have a couple of Floridians on this call. Blair, our producer, although he's further south, I think, and Bob, who I think you're right there. You're in sort of ground zero, right?
Well, I'm more closer to Orlando, but yeah, I'm right in between, so I'm not far from Tampa. Probably about 2 hours.
Has the Tampa?
I'm about the same. I'm about an hour north of Orlando, so about 2 hours from Tampa.
Has Tampa fever spread out that far?
Well, it's more like Tom Brady fever, really.
Yeah, I figured. I think it is.
Yeah, a lot of people are excited about it. Yeah, it's been a fun ride watching him kind of elevate that team this year. So, you know, it's interesting, mostly being at home, right, a home stadium. The first time that's ever happened. So it's going to be a very interesting game next week for sure. But I wouldn't bet against the Chiefs.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I agree.
And sorry to interrupt. Just in the spirit of full disclosure, I do need to mention that I'm no longer with Elior North America as of October of 2020 due to COVID and the impact on the food service industry. As you can all imagine, there were some difficult business decisions that need to be made, and I'm currently in career transition at this point and looking forward to the next opportunity.
Yeah, and I think, you know, and you and I had a chance to talk last weekend a bit about things, and I think that actually opens it up to a couple conversations, you know, in terms of, you know, I know you've got an entrepreneurial bent to you, and I definitely want to talk about that in terms of what, you know, how you can leverage the cloud in that world. But let's go back to food services because, you know, when agreed. I think food is one of my favorite things without question. And but I always think about food within the construct of I go to a restaurant or I go to the grocery store. I never, ever do it enough justice as it relates to what I would call supply chain. And I kind of put your career a bit in that bucket, you know, in the sense that it's providing, you know, food to institutions and, you know, large swaths of of our country. And there's so much about that I think people aren't aware of. And, you know, finding efficiencies and leveraging technology to make that a better, stronger process. I think it could be great to hear you talk about that for a bit. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. The food service industry and the food industry in general, I think COVID and the pandemic has opened everyone's eyes to what is essential and essential workers, and keeping people fed is really essential.
Yeah.
The grocery stores, you know, those are one of the few things that when communities go on full lockdown and you're not allowed to leave your house except for essential activities, going to the grocery store is one of those essential activities. Restaurants, you know, this has been one of the most challenging times I think any of us can ever imagine for restaurants that already in normal times operate on very thin margins, and to try to manage labor and anticipate how much food do they need to buy, how much labor do they need to hire, what hours of service do they need to be open. Those are all challenges in normal times, and it has just been magnified with the pandemic. With food and fresh items, you're always guarding against spoilage. You don't want to order too much. You don't want to order too little. You need to make sure that you have the right items in stock for the menu. Forecasting the quantities and types of food items that are on that menu is a challenge for a small local, one location operation. Now imagine trying to do that across thousands of locations across the United States in different communities with different rules and regulations that are constantly changing week to week, month to month, based on, the governor says we're going to do this now, and suddenly you're going to need to pivot. The introduction of contactless, making sure people can order ahead or use their phone to see the menu, order an item, and then come pick it up. Or the advent of what you're seeing with DoorDash and Uber Eats and the delivery model. And the explosion of ghost kitchens. Ghost kitchens are, restaurants that you never go there. You don't even know where it is. It could be an industrial warehouse somewhere, and they're preparing food, and it's a complete delivery model. So the amount of change that's been injected into the food service industry on a broad scope has just been massive. The amount of digital transformation that's taken place in this industry over the last year, it's like 5 or maybe even 10 years of digital innovation that's just been accelerated because of necessity. There's no other way to survive other than use technology.
Yeah, and that's been a theme without question. And so what I get curious about is, as you talk, I think about, and I have no reason to believe that this is accurate, but things like artificial intelligence or ways to forecast more effectively within, the many different patterns that may exist within your business. But when you think about transformation over the last year that has leaped 5 to 10 years, what examples are there? What is it that you thought never would have happened, and it had this not occurred?
QR codes on tables is one. It's no longer you're handed a menu. You bring your own phone. It has your own, germs and bacteria on the phone. So that's the only thing you're going to touch. You scan the barcode, you pop up the menu, you order your item, it goes back to the kitchen. There's a kitchen printer that's back there for the cooks. They know what to prepare. You have an order number, and then the fulfillment of that order can take place in a number of ways. A server could bring it to your table. They could put it in a bag and put it at a pickup location, or it can go to a delivery driver and be delivered straight to your door.
Yeah. And it's funny, from my perspective, it was just the QR code pulling up a menu, but as with anything in this space, it's always the back end that's the fascinating part. The part that it's automating the fulfillment on the back end with the kitchen. That's fair. Really good.
And go ahead.
Vito, one of the things that's interesting to me is, back in our day, we used to always pick up the phone and dial for a pizza, right? And then they were kind of the first innovators to take that to a web or to an app and being able to do that. And now we don't even really think about picking up the phone to do that. We just, use our iPhone or whatever. What I found it was interesting is basically every other type of food service had to get up and running very quickly on that, whether it's your local diner or a big chain that obviously might have been there a little bit earlier. But to me, it was very interesting how quickly that they had to get to the web and have that type of ordering now. So now, no matter, if it's your local deli or a large chain, you can do that right on your phone, and you're not calling, which means you don't need people answering the phone, and they can do other things. So that was very interesting to me how quickly that happened during the pandemic.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great point. And if you look, there's lots of case studies on Domino's, the pizza company, and really they're a digital first company, and they were way ahead of the curve. But you're right. The pandemic caused rapid adoption for so many small mom and pop companies, and they're able to do it through the cloud. That's the amazing thing about what timing. What amazing timing to have all of these technology capabilities that you can rapidly stand up, They're pretty easy and inexpensive to use. It's as a service, so it's a monthly fee. You don't need to buy a bunch of infrastructure. You might need an advanced point of sale system that's cloud enabled, but that also introduces PCI credit card compliance from the merchant processors. So there's tons of advantages for small food service companies and even the large ones to take advantage of this explosion of cloud technology that's become available over the last 5 to 10 years, and really embrace it. And I think at this point, we will get back to normal times eventually. When that is, none of us knows. But when that happens, I don't see the technology going away. I think this has opened the eyes of so many operators that there are clear advantages from a forecasting and predictability perspective on not just the food items, but also the labor. And to your point, getting people out of the business of taking phone calls for orders, and you have communication issues where you may have ordered a sausage and pepperoni, but they only wrote down sausage, or the handwriting wasn't clear. Those mistakes go away with technology. And now you've freed up a person that no longer has to answer the phone and can do more other interesting value-added things that provides a better service for the client.
Well, so
right, it really was a
go ahead.
waste of labor. But yep, no, it's just interesting that I really love that point too. You're paying somebody that's a really important part of your business to answer the phone, and you're right. Now that person can be doing something else, getting orders out because they don't have to sit on the phone all day. So, like you said, we talk a lot about how bad 2020 was and how bad the pandemic is. But there are going to be some things that come out of it that are positives. And I think that is definitely one for sure. So thank you for that.
Completely agree. And of course, while we were talking, Blair, our producer, pinged us and said he was a Domino's. Did you say manager, Blair, or were you?
Yeah, I was a manager in a few stores. And I remember the days where we'd have, 5, or 6, people answering the phones, and you'd be ringing, and then you have your crew there. And then, it was definitely a compare and contrast when technology took over and all the orders started coming in through the cloud and through the internet, because you would walk into the store to pick up a pizza, and I actually thought it was almost like eerily, it was very quiet. You didn't have those people answering the phones anymore. You just had the orders coming in and printing out, and then you have people making the pizzas. So that was definitely. But you're right, definitely right as far as the improving order accuracy, especially with the pizzas, because it's not like you're writing up pepperoni. You could be writing P for pepperoni, or I think R was black olives or something like that. But it could be easy for someone to, miswrite a letter. But if it's on on the computer, it's just typed in at the end user's computer at home, and it prints out exactly what they want at the terminal at the make line.
Actually, Vito brings up something that I had forgotten, which was, there are many case studies tied to Domino's and technology in the cloud. And one of the early ones, and this is perfect timing because we're upon the Super Bowl, is, if you look at if you look at Domino's business, the vast majority of their business every week comes on, a Friday or Saturday. But then there's this huge number of pizzas that get delivered on and about Super Bowl. And, when the cloud was first being introduced, they recognized that if they looked at their own infrastructure, they had built up this infrastructure, the servers and everything else to support, in essence, that one day, which is when they were at the peak of their business. They needed to build an infrastructure, and the investment was for that one day. But then through the rest of the year, maybe that infrastructure got to, X capacity, but nowhere near what it did during the Super Bowl. So when the cloud came out, they realized that they could build their online, let's call it platform, if you will, so that it could scale using IaaS, infrastructure as a service. So they weren't, they didn't have the investment of all of, the servers and the racks and so forth. They were investing based on consumption. And it ended up being an incredible saver for them. And that became one of the very first clear case studies. And I believe it was an Azure case study way, way back in the day. And of course, everything has evolved since then. but very apropos given that we're on the week before the Super Bowl.
That's great. Hey, Vito, I got a question about your K through 12 experience, and it really doesn't have to deal with cloud, but it's more about the meals and understanding, the children that you're feeding in that environment. And I understand there's a little bit of argument between healthy foods and what kids will eat at that age. And I just wondered how your organization handled that. Was there any technology that went into something like that? And how did you and your organization kind of handle the difference between health and then the stuff that kids will eat in the K through 12 space?
Sure. So those are great questions, and I have a lot of passion. I've spent a lot of time in the K-12 food service space. So the first thing in K-12 food that you need to understand is, does that school or school district participate in the USDA National School Lunch Program? Because school districts have a choice to make. They can either participate or they cannot participate. If they participate in the National School Lunch Program, there are federal subsidies that are available to help supplement that school lunch program. And the economics of a K-12 cafeteria, depending on the profile of the student body, meaning if you're in a very well-to-do neighborhood with well-to-do school district, or even a private school, they may not need the money from the National School Lunch Program, in which case they can serve whatever they'd like. There's no regulation. There's no, people refer to it as the Michelle Obama regulations, but that's not really true. It's the USDA. And those guidelines don't need to be followed for a school district that is not getting those subsidy dollars. However, for the vast majority of schools in the United States, they do participate in the National School Lunch Program. And as such, there are very specific nutritional guidelines that go along with that, which require schools to serve whole grain items, offer fruits and vegetables and milk, and you're needing to provide the 5 main items of a main entree, a milk, a fruit, a vegetable, and a bread. And those can come in different forms. So you can imagine a pizza. A pizza could meet the requirements for the protein and the bread. And then you need to serve the fruit. And the way the school lunch program works is the child, as they go through that lunch line, they must take 3 out of the 5 items in order to qualify as a reimbursable meal in the USDA program. And there are guidelines around tracking what was offered on that day, what was the draw, how many students. Students can apply for being a part of the free lunch program. Students can apply to be on a reduced price program, or students can, pay the full price. But even the full price meal is subsidized, and a lot of parents don't realize this, that even if your child is paying full price for the school lunch, there's still a subsidy that comes along with that because it's part of the National School Lunch Program. So, the technologies that we've employed in the past, and I can't go into a lot of detail, but I'll just give you some general ideas, is you start with ensuring that menu of items is going to comply with the National School Lunch Guidelines, and that the items on the menu, are going to have a certain draw, because I think anyone with kids knows that kids tend to like certain items and they tend to not like other items. And the draw on that, or we refer to it as the draw, you can think of it as the consumption pattern, can vary from child to child, school to school, community to community, because some items are very popular in the South and not popular in the North. Some items on the menu are very desirable on the West Coast, but not on the East Coast. And so forecasting becomes a big play there, because you are always guarding against waste.
So can I jump in really quick, because I find that really super interesting. So there's consumption as in what was actually consumed by the kids, and then there's purchasing as in terms of what was purchased by the district. But I think what you're talking about is just actual consumption. These were the per units that were selected by the kids, and that's what we're measuring.
Yeah, well, yeah, to be clear, so consumption is measured by what was on their tray when they went through the cash register line.
Perfect.
Nobody's tracking what they actually eat and put in their mouths.
Right. Yes, that is probably good and safe. but in terms of what they put on their tray, I think is interesting in the sense that it's more than just what the district bought, and I think that's important. And I think what you're saying is you're actually tracking that and monitoring that, and you can measure it, and that really can help in terms of being more thoughtful in terms of what is produced. So I think that's interesting.
Absolutely. And trying to survey the children and survey the teachers to understand what do they like, what don't they like, because we want to make sure that we're putting items that they will enjoy on the menu while still working inside that National School Lunch Program framework, because you can't serve them pizza every day. They would love to have pizza every day. There are some things that you can do around having a two-choice menu where you can have, well, today it's either pizza or it's chicken nuggets, or the next day it might be hot dogs or hamburgers. And so you can give them a choice. They can choose one or the other, but you can't put the same item on the menu every single day.
And so for Elior and organizations like Elior, you're providing this intelligence to the schools, helping them guide what they put on their menus, and in doing so, you're helping them allow their kids to achieve nutritional goals, but at the same time achieve the economic goals that may be out there in terms of district and budgets and so forth. I'm assuming those are the two drivers in that mechanism.
Yeah, I would add the third, that kids with empty bellies have a hard time learning, and kids that have food in their belly tend to perform better on their scores and tests, which is another driver for the school district.
I think it's awesome.
It is the economics, it is health and wellness, but it's also about education and test scores.
And okay, so perfect. I love that. So if you looked at those three criteria, and where your mission has been over the last several years, as as Vito, as Elior, at Preferred, are there improvements? Is it getting better?
Yeah, I think it constantly gets better over time. When those regulations changed, it was the first regulatory change in about 20 years to the National School Lunch Nutrition Guidelines. There was definitely a dip when the guidelines first came out. I think kids over time started to get used to, okay, this is what's on the menu at school. Of course, the pandemic changed all that because kids, weren't in school. But we, as a company, we still had a mission to feed those kids, because for many of those kids, that free lunch is critical. It's a critical thing for them. So there was a lot of pivoting that happened around 5-day meal packs and allowing parents to come to the school one day a week to pick up the week's worth of breakfast and lunch for the kid in a 5-day meal pack. There's some school districts that made the choice to do reverse bus stops, where the food would go on the bus and the bus driver would run the bus route in reverse. And the kids would come out to the bus stop, and instead of getting on the bus, their food would be delivered to them.
Yeah,
so
that is incredible.
Yeah, it is.
That's
I did not know that.
Stories.
Yeah, I did not know any of that. That's, and it's great to hear too.
And we did deploy some new technology to help enable those things, so that parents could order online. and still see the menu and still be compliant to the National School Lunch Program. But we need a way to capture the orders differently, because typically the orders would come in from the teacher in the classroom in the morning, so that the cafeteria staff would know how much to cook of certain items. And, it's within a tolerance level, so that you try to make sure that who's ever eating the last lunch period, if we say we're having a 2-choice menu, you run the risk, and it does happen, where the pizza becomes so popular that by the time the last kids get to the lunch period, we've run out of pizza, and now all we have are cheeseburgers.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
that's a
dissatisfier, and kids cry, and it's terrible. It's terrible.
Yeah. No, I have to say I remember pizza growing up at school, and that being, that's been a constant over the generations, is that pizza is definitely preferred. And I remember actually seeing how it was made, Vito. You and I had a chance to work together in a past chapter, and at Preferred, I remember getting the chance to walk through the I don't want to say factory, but assembly area. And
Yep.
It was really, really fascinating in terms of all the many different elements of producing food at the scale, and in such a way that it was, obviously safe and wholesome. And watching the pizza get made was really cool. That was fun. The whole thing was.
Yeah, it's mesmerizing.
It is. It's a really good word for it.
On YouTube, how it's made is one of my favorite YouTube channels.
Okay, I have not. So the channel is actually how it's made. Is that, and so you can put anything in there? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's a show about how things are made.
I've never. God, now I'm going to end up going to it. That is so interesting. Now here we are on our podcast promoting a YouTube channel. That's great.
Well, we're learning so much today.
I know.
It's awesome. It's great.
Burritos
Vito.
Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to recap on something you said, because I had always heard that even in summer, right, a lot of kids go hungry because they don't get that meal, right? I know here in Florida, they do a breakfast and a lunch. And when they're not getting those nutritional meals every day for the folks that need them, that's a big hit. And I worried about that in the pandemic. I wondered, how are they going to be able to get those meals? And to hear that, an organization like you were with and the school districts did what they did to do the reverse busing, to do the box meals. That is heartwarming. That is exactly a great story of people coming together, technology coming together, and doing the right thing for people. And that just warms my heart. I love to hear stories like that, because I would imagine for you, it was also very fulfilling, because those are the kind of things that, makes you happy about having a corporate job, but being able to touch people's lives that way has just got to be an incredible feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mentioned earlier is a higher calling, and you're touching
Right.
on some of those points. When I was a kid, I didn't grow up well-to-do, and I ate the school lunch, and being able to help those kids that are out there today and put a healthy, nutritious meal in their belly, that's purpose in life, and it's making a difference. It's making a difference in a lot of kids' lives across the country. And not having them in school, you're absolutely right. It's terrible for some of these kids. They're going through a nightmare right now, and they're home. They're at home going through this nightmare alone. The summer programs, different communities offer summer programs even in normal times. I think it's become more critical even now with the pandemic. And some of those are sponsored by park districts, or they're sponsored by local communities or counties or cities. The city of Philadelphia is a great example, where they have what they call, in the summertime, they call them play streets, and they essentially block off a street and designate a house where all the meals are delivered to that house, and any kids in that neighborhood can come to that house and get a meal anytime. And it's paid for by the city of Philadelphia. They've been doing this for decades. And it's just a great example of how communities can bridge that gap during the summertime between the school years.
Yeah, no, that's great. So let's kind of fast forward a bit if we could. Eventually the pandemic will, be mitigated and we'll return to some sense of what I guess we're calling the next normal. And kids will be back in school, and we'll return to the many challenges that exist in a kind of typical year. What in your opinion, what else could be done? What's the next step? How do we get better even from where we are today in terms of the mission that you've described?
Yeah, I think the new technologies that are becoming more accessible to companies, like cloud solutions, artificial intelligence, machine learning, even hybrid cloud, to be able to move workloads from a data center into the cloud and back again. All of these things are really, they're ingredients, and it's going to take smart technology people and business people to understand what ingredients are available and how do you bring those together to bake a cake that's new and novel. And like we said earlier, these technologies are not going away. They've opened a lot of people's eyes, and there are new business models and new business processes that become enabled. An example is ghost kitchens. Ghost kitchens, historically, if you wanted to open a restaurant, you needed to stand up some brick and mortar, have some tables, take away, that sort of thing. But now you can start a restaurant online, and it's only online, and the kitchen can be anywhere, and you can have some really nice items, or some, maybe a jalapeno cheeseburger that's just amazing that you're really good at making. Food trucks are another good example of where these food trucks can move from place to place and go to where the people are. The back end side of things, it's in food, it's all about getting scale and being able to run a lot of volume, because with the food service industry has always been a low margin industry, and the way to get out of that problem is volume, to move massive amounts through the system, to be able to source items really from all over the globe. So you're sourcing food items depending on the season from different geographies and different continents, and being able to have the traceability. I think blockchain, with what's happening with some of the digital currencies, but underneath all of that is blockchain that is just perfect for traceability and recall and chain of possession, and ensuring that ingredients are pure and
never thought about that.
Not adulterated.
I really appreciate you applying blockchain to something else other than cryptocurrency. And that's a very interesting thought, what you just did. I hadn't had that conversation before. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so I think the perspective here is you have an industry, food, it's been around forever. Humans have been eating forever, and they will always eat. We have to eat to survive. It's an essential service. But these new technologies are allowing us to think in new creative ways to apply the technology and innovate and create new offerings that never existed before, and make that more accessible to more consumers, but also more operators.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. Cool. Good framing. All right, so let's pivot, because what I want to do also is give us some time to talk about the next chapter, right? And I know that you were kind enough to do the disclaimer at the beginning of the call in terms of where you are in your career, and kind of sussing out new chapters and new opportunities, which is always a fun, can be and should be a fun moment in time. And I know that in your case, it opens up, it has opened up entrepreneurial opportunities as well as other career opportunities. And as we talked, we had a conversation about Airbnb. We talked about, the fact that the cloud and new technologies do provide new opportunities to take a career in different directions. And I kind of just want to hear you talk about that, because you've had some really great experiences in terms of having that hat on. And I am a firm believer that the cloud does enable, an entrepreneur in ways that other generations have not had. And I'd love to talk about that a bit.
Sure. So, I've always had an entrepreneurial bug from a pretty young age. When I was in high school, I would sit in class and there'd always be somebody that would show up to class without a pen. So I always kept about 10 pens on me, ready to sell them for a buck.
Love
Nice.
My buddy and I had a boat washing business where we washed and waxed boats for well-to-do people in St. Louis, where I grew up. And we were always hustling. So through college, I had a number of different jobs working at a lumber yard and at the boat harbor. And as I got into the working world and started my career at Kraft Foods and working in IT, my wife worked in heart surgery in Chicago. And so we were both, full-time working folks. And we started investing in real estate probably in our late 20s and bought some rental properties and rented them out as traditional, 12-month leases. And then when we moved to Charlotte, we sold all of those properties and took a year to kind of get settled into Charlotte and decided to buy a rental property. But instead of doing a traditional 12-year lease, we decided to do an Airbnb model, or short-term rental is probably a better way to describe it, because Airbnb has essentially become the Kleenex of tissue. It's the brand. But there are lots of different short-term rental platforms that exist, VRBO, Booking.com, and others. Rentline is another one that's out there. So all of these are platforms, and they're cloud-based platforms that enable a small entrepreneur that somebody has an asset and you want to share it. It's kind of all part of the sharing economy, whether you're putting your car to work as an Uber or a Lyft driver, or you have a rental property that instead of selling it on a 1-year basis, you're selling it on a nightly basis. And so that has enabled my wife and I to, and it's mostly her. So I'll do credit. I'd have to say this is mostly my wife that's doing all the work around the hosting and listing and dealing with clients, because, as a full-time CIO, I didn't have the time to dedicate to that. But she's really embraced what's happening on these platforms, and not only the cloud technology around listing the properties and checking people in and getting ratings and those things, but also leveraging IoT. So putting smart locks on the front door so that she can just give a code to a guest rather than a key. So that's a one-time use code that guest can use for the duration of their stay. And after they leave, she cancels the code and they can no longer access the property. Using things like Ring cameras to keep an eye on the property, because you can't be there all the time. And especially during the pandemic, we've had guests that want to have big parties, and that's not allowed. So you need to leverage these types of technologies to make sure that you're keeping an eye on things. And other IoT items like smart thermostats, being able to control the temperature of the house to make sure it's at the right temperature and you're not wasting energy, but that it's also comfortable for the guest. So all of these kind of technologies are available now, and they're very affordable. They're very accessible. That didn't exist, 5 years ago. I don't know how long Airbnb has been around, but it's just really exploded. And certainly during the pandemic, the business model's been doing quite well because people value privacy. They don't want to be around, in a hotel with hundreds of other people. They want their own place that they can isolate with their small pod of friends and family. And so, yeah, that's just another example, I guess, of how cloud technologies have become very accessible to small entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's also another example of how, there was this disruption of the pandemic, which completely radically shaped the hospitality industry. But then there was this subset, meaning, the Airbnb / Kleenex, and that's become the winner in all of this, and cloud technology is enabling that, which is a really neat story. So in terms of your next chapter, do you see yourself moving into an entrepreneurial bent, or staying in food services, or maybe combining the two?
Gosh, that's a great question, Elliot. Yeah, I think all of those things. It's like I said earlier, food and technology are some of my favorite things in life. I can't imagine ever completely getting away from technology. There, the ingredients are out there to bake cakes, to put it all together, to take these different technologies and mash them together in a new and novel ways. And I just see lots of opportunity, both on the corporate side of going back and being a CIO for an organization that is interested in embracing these new technologies. But I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, and I don't see that ever changing. And it's something that it's a side hustle. Whether it becomes a full-time job, I suppose that could happen. At this point, this is the first career break that I've had in 25 years. So I'm just taking some time to reflect and learn a lot. I've been studying artificial intelligence and machine learning and blockchain to just really get kind of down in the weeds with it and understand it at a more granular level than, not just the high level. Because I just see lots of opportunities for organizations of all sizes and shapes to deploy these technologies in a way that makes sense and can be quite fulfilling.
Yeah, really neat. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us again, and of course, wish you the best with where you are right now. I hope you're enjoying the time, to just reflect, and of course, wish you the best in terms of where all this takes you. And I'm sure we'll talk soon. But thank you, Vito. We really appreciate you being part of this.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vito.